You'd hope to be a sellout here for the first couple of days, but that might be being a bit ambitious. But I think as the reconstruction is imminent, perhaps we can just for today call this the Sachin cricket ground.
Yes.
Because really that's what takes most people's interest, whether the great man can actually achieve that landmark. It's a curious landmark because it's neither one thing or the other. It's not 100 test centuries, it's not 100 one-day hundreds. It's a combination of both, which no one has ever done. And he averages 221 on this ground, so there's a fair chance he might get 100 here.
Well, let's talk about the tactics, because there's been plenty written about Sachin training in the nets this week. Maybe we might see one of those innings without any cover drives. Do you think India is going to go in and leave as many balls as possible and grind Australia down?
Well, it's curious. There was a tactic played out here under Steve Waugh a few tours ago when Sachin got 200, and the idea was to bowl a foot and a half outside the off stump. But the pitch was so flat and the batting was so good and the bowling was so straight, it didn't matter where you bowled to him. So I think once we get through the excitement of the first hour or two, given the conditions we've got here and are likely for the next few days, someone's going to get a lot of runs here. This is a very good pitch as a rule to bat on. We saw England get 664 against Australia's very straight and undemanding bowling here a year ago. Hopefully they're a bit better than that. They seem to be coming out of Melbourne, but that's a bit different. Bit of grass on the pitch. Bowlers were always in the game. Here it might be a bit tougher if batsmen get set.
And Jim, I just want to talk about the teams. Maybe Rohit Sharma might come in at the last minute for Virat Kohli, but the Australian team, they've gone with Nathan Lyon. Of course, it's traditionally a spinner's wicket, but how have you seen that selection of Lyon? Is Australia looking to put some confidence into the off-spinner who didn't make a great impact in the MCG?
Well, he didn't get much bowling, to be fair. I mean, the conditions probably didn't suit. And, OK, the Indian batsmen are well versed at playing spin, but he's done an extremely good job since he came into the Australian team. He's played 8 tests. He's never played on this ground, actually, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I think he's got the stomach for the battle that perhaps a few of the others that have gone through the revolving door since Shane Warne haven't had. So I expect him to play a role in the game around the pace attack. But it's really up to the pace bowling, and it's pretty much the same for India. This isn't the pitch that Stuart MacGill and Shane Warne rushed through sides on some years ago. It used to be a bit of a dust bowl in those days, but today it's a much better all-round cricket pitch where the pace bowlers have most influence.
What have you made of the talk pre-test from both teams? The name Harbhajan Singh came up at the media conference yesterday. MS Dhoni didn't want to talk about that. There's a story in the paper today about the Indians having to be made to wait to see the Prime Minister, and they're not happy about that. Can you sense any tension there?
Oh, well, people like to crank things up, I suppose. Why don't we get Andrew Simons back as well and get them out there? I mean, let's move on, folks. I mean, Ashwin's a fine bowler. I think he'll do a good job for them. I assume he's going to play unless they go for Ozha, but Ashwin did enough in Melbourne to suggest he's going to continue in the side. And there's always going to be tension in test matches. Australia's going to fling down a few bumpers at the tail enders. Sometimes the aggression's a bit overt and the umpires have to step in. Look, there's always something going on in the game. I mean, they played here 130 years ago, you know, and the opening bowlers bowled 115 overs unchanged and bowled England out for 133. I don't think that's going to happen. They were 4-ball overs, mind you.
And were they underarms?
No, they weren't. No, they weren't lob bowlers, but they're probably about the pace of Mike Hussey, Joey Palmer and Edwin Evans.
Yeah.
But look, there's always something that's going to blow in a test match, and hopefully for most of us it's a matter of enjoying the contest and not having any unnecessary aggro going on.
Now, what are you suspecting might happen? Tell us about maybe a player that you think might make a big score, or a bowler that might have a standout match, Jim, in this 100th test at the SCG.
Well, I'd like to think that Michael Clarke could impose himself. He hasn't been everybody's favourite since he became captain, perhaps because of his celebrity lifestyle, and he's taken a while to put that behind him because most of his captaincy has been away from home. but having watched him in all those test matches in Sri Lanka and South Africa, I think he's bringing something to the game that perhaps his predecessors didn't have in terms of some imagination and tactical nous. That's not to say Ricky wasn't a very good captain, but Michael might just take it a step further. But if he's going to make sure of his position, he needs to get runs, and that's the little concern around some of his cricket, that you know, he gets out a bit easily, nicking one or something like that. So let's hope the Australian captain can impose himself with a score. And for the locals who've seen him, they'd love to see Dave Warner come off again, because he's arguably on the way to becoming one of Australia's finest batsmen in all forms of the game, if he can get it right. So those two players, I mean, obviously Ed Cowan opening with Warner and Marsh at 3, that's a situation Australia wants to bed down fairly soon, because they've got instability in their top order, as much through varying form and injury to people like Shane Watson. That's disturbed them too. So the other side of it, from India's viewpoint, everyone wants Sehwag to come off, but he's more risk than reward with his batting these days in Test match cricket. And Laxman, of course, who averages almost 100 on this ground, a beautiful player, if we could see him going. So look, there are a lot of stellar attractions about the batting. I think the bowlers might have a tougher time of it than they did in Melbourne.